December 1944. Europe is freezing under a brutal winter sky. Inside a bunker beneath Berlin, Adolf Hitler studies blueprints lit by a flickering bulb, rockets capable of crossing the English Channel, tanks with thicker armor and deadly guns, jet aircraft faster than anything the Allies have built. These are the machines he believes will change the war's fate, his final hope for victory. But 4,000 miles away, across a vast ocean, lies a different kind of power, not hidden in a bunker, but roaring from endless factory floors. The United States, a nation that has transformed its peacetime industry into a war machine unlike anything the world has ever seen. Convoys surge from American ports. Tanks roll off assembly lines every few minutes. Bombers rise by the thousands, turning steel and fuel into relentless momentum. Hitler dreams of wonder weapons. America answers with overwhelming firepower. A war that once depended on strategy and skill has become a race of production, and the United States is sprinting far ahead. And as the snow falls over collapsing Reich, one truth becomes clear. Numbers, sheer, unstoppable numbers, will decide the end. This was how US firepower dwarfed Hitler's final hope. By 1943, the Third Reich, once a machine of relentless conquest, was bleeding from every direction. The sweeping victories of 1939 to 1941 were now distant memories. The Eastern Front had swallowed entire German armies. The Mediterranean was slipping away, and in the West, a storm was gathering. Germany's grand plan for blitzkrieg, victory through speed and surprise, had collided with industrial reality. Quick wars had turned into grinding wars, and grinding wars demand endless steel, endless fuel, endless men. Resources Hitler simply no longer had. The Allied bombing campaign tore into Germany's industrial heart. Cities like Hamburg, Essen, Cologne, and Berlin burned beneath waves of American B-17s and British Lancasters. Factories once proud symbols of German engineering now lay in smoldering ruins. Trains stopped. Assembly lines seized. Skilled workers vanished into the chaos of war. Meanwhile, civilians faced shortages that choked the nation's strength. Food rationing was tightened. Ersatz, synthetic substitutes, replaced everything from rubber to fuel. What the German economy produced came too late, in too few quantities, and was far too complex to build under bombardment. Yet inside the Führer bunker, Hitler refused to accept defeat. He believed salvation lay not in mass production, but in perfection. Tanks like the Panther and Tiger boasted unmatched armor and firepower. The infamous V-2 rocket fell from the stratosphere, faster than sound, impossible to stop. Jet fighters like the Me-262 could outrun anything the Allies put in the sky. On paper, Germany seemed poised to leap into the future of warfare. But the truth appeared in every battlefield report. These machines were few. They broke down often. They drank fuel Germany no longer had. Every prototype sent to the front could not be replaced when lost. In contrast, the armies advancing toward Germany seemed endless. American forces landed in North Africa, then Sicily, then Italy, then Normandy. Each time more men, more tanks, more artillery, more aircraft than the last. A new kind of warfare had emerged, victory through volume. By late 1944, Germany fought not just soldiers, but the entire industrial power of the United States. While German workers struggled to assemble a handful of advanced weapons in underground caves, American factories rolled out hundreds of tanks and planes in the same time. Every statistic served as a warning. Germany built Tiger tanks over the entire war. The US built Sherman tanks. Germany deployed jets in the hundreds. The US delivered aircraft of all types. Germany's shipyards were crippled. The US launched a Liberty ship every 3 days. Quantity had become a weapon one Germany could not match. The Reich's high command saw what Hitler refused to admit. The war was turning into a colossal industrial contest, and Germany had already lost the race. Every day that passed widened the gap. Yet despite the growing collapse, Hitler doubled down. He ordered more wonder weapons, more experiments, more engineering miracles. But no miracle could stop the momentum of a nation that had awakened its factories. Because across the ocean, another story was unfolding, one of a democracy transformed into the world's greatest arsenal. Next, we witness how America's industrial awakening began reshaping the war's destiny. The United States did not enter World War II as a military giant. In 1939, its army ranked behind Portugal and Romania. Isolationism ran deep. Factories produced automobiles, tractors, refrigerators, not weapons. Americans still hoped the oceans would shield them from war. Pearl Harbor ended that illusion in a single morning. Within days, a nation of manufacturers turned into the most powerful war industry in human history. The transformation was immediate, massive, and astonishing. Detroit, America's car capital, became the arsenal of democracy. Assembly lines designed for civilian life were re-engineered for total war. Lines once making sedans now hammered out armored hulls. Skilled mechanics who once built engines for highways now built engines for the skis. Ford's Willow Run plant produced one B-24 bomber every hour. General Motors manufactured machines for every branch of service, from tanks to bullets. Chrysler forged gun barrels and military trucks by the thousands. In the shipyards, an even greater miracle unfolded. The Liberty ship, simple, rugged, and fast to build, became the lifeline of the Allied war. Welders worked around the clock. Torchlight lit the coasts like industrial dawn. One ship launched every few days, delivering troops, tanks, fuel, and food across the Atlantic in an unstoppable stream. It wasn't just weapons, it was everything a modern army needed. 12 billion bullets, 2.4 million trucks, 2,600 major warships, millions of uniforms, radios, medical kits, and rations. While German factories struggled in ruins, American facilities expanded, often constructing new plants even faster than bombs could destroy existing ones overseas. Behind every soldier was a mountain of machinery. Behind every battle, a train of supplies stretching further than the eye could see. Logistics became a weapon, precision, abundance, and relentless delivery. But the heart of America's rise wasn't just steel or fuel, it was people. 16 million Americans entered the armed forces. Millions more, including women entering factories for the first time, became the workforce that powered victory. Every rivet, every shell, every engine carried the strength of a nation united by a purpose larger than itself. Factories hummed day and night, conveyor belts never slept. The rhythm of production became the rhythm of the war. In Washington, generals realized what Hitler never understood. Armies win battles, industry wins wars. The US didn't need the most advanced tank or the fastest aircraft or the most elite troops. It only needed enough, more than enough, to overwhelm the enemy everywhere at once. And so the balance of power tipped. Not gradually, but decisively. As the Allies marched toward the heart of Europe, the contrast became stark. Germany was shrinking. America was expanding. Hitler saw his hopes shrinking with every bomber siren, every fuel shortage, every division lost. Meanwhile, US commanders planned operations with confidence that more supplies were already on the way, thousands of miles behind them. The war's fate, once uncertain, now pointed toward an inevitable conclusion. But the battle for Europe was not only about numbers or factories. It was about the human struggle on the ground, where firepower determined survival. And that brings us to the personal and tactical angles of how US strength crushed the last hopes of the Reich. Germany entered the war with technological ambition unmatched by any nation in Europe. The Tiger and Panther tanks terrified Allied crews. The Me-262 jet fighter was a glimpse of future warfare decades ahead of its time. And the V-2 rocket, a ballistic missile screaming faster than sound, seemed like science fiction turned real. Yet every one of these weapons suffered from the same fatal flaw. Germany could not build enough of them. A single Tiger tank required months to assemble. Precious alloys Germany lacked. Skilled labor constantly interrupted by bombing. For each Tiger rolling out of a secret factory, US plants churned out dozens of Shermans with interchangeable parts, standardized tooling, and simple maintenance. The Me-262 might defeat a bomber in seconds, but fuel was scarce, pilots were few, and repairs took far too long. Meanwhile, American escort fighters, P-47 Thunderbolts and P-51 Mustangs filled the skies in overwhelming numbers. They didn't have to be perfect. They only had to be present in force. It was the classic wartime paradox. Germany built weapons to win duels. America built weapons to win wars. The Reich gambled on quality. The US delivered unstoppable quantity. And every front of the conflict revealed that simple truth. On the frozen fields of Belgium, in the shattered towns of France, and across the hedgerows of Normandy, American soldiers learned very quickly what it meant to face German engineering. A Panther tank might appear from the mist, its guns swinging toward them like a predator in the dark. A single shot could tear apart a Sherman. German machine gunners fired the deadly MG-42, 1,200 rounds a minute, its roar known as Hitler's buzzsaw. But US forces fought with an advantage that wasn't always visible: backing. Artillery on call. Air cover overhead. Fuel trucks constantly rolling. Replacements arriving daily. When a Sherman was knocked out, another took its place. When a company was depleted, fresh troops filled the lines. When German soldiers ran out of ammunition, water, or food, Americans received more than they could carry. War is unforgiving to those who run dry. Behind every rifleman stood a logistical chain stretching from Normandy beaches to Kansas steel mills. It meant US infantry could keep moving forward slowly, painfully, while German defenders gradually withered. One German officer reportedly wrote, "They always have more tanks, more planes, more guns, more men, endless." Firepower became a shield, supply became a lifeline. And together, they turned exhaustion into progress. America's war production was not simply vast, it was strategic. Factories produced weapons designed for fast manufacturing, easy repair, and efficient transport. Commanders, planners, and industrial leaders coordinated like a single organism driven by one goal: deliver overwhelming force where it mattered. Every branch benefited. Army. Fully motorized, every soldier could move fast. Artillery dominance, the real killer of the battlefield. Navy. Escorts protected convoys. New carriers projected power everywhere. Air Force. Long-range bombers struck German industry and morale. Fighters secured the skies and crippled the Luftwaffe. Even the fuel that powered them was American. Germany drilled only a fraction of what it needed and relied heavily on synthetic fuel. The Allies targeted those plants mercilessly, grounding the Luftwaffe and freezing tank battalions in place. Germany built marvels that couldn't reach the battlefield. America built weapons that arrived in waves and never stopped coming. The result was a widening gulf: economic, military, and psychological. Desperation versus abundance. Crumbling dreams versus accelerating force. And as 1944 turned to 1945, this imbalance pushed Hitler toward increasingly risky decisions, the kind that would define the final phase of the war. No army moves without fuel, no tank rolls, no aircraft lifts off, no truck resupplies the front. By 1944, Germany was starving for oil. The synthetic fuel plants at Luna, Perlitz, and Blechhammer kept the Wehrmacht alive, until American bombers turned them into flaming craters. Each strike wasn't just an industrial loss, it was a battlefield disaster delayed by days. Luftwaffe pilots were grounded. Panzer divisions sat motionless. Training hours were slashed to mere minutes. Meanwhile, American trucks, the ubiquitous GMC Deuce and a Half, delivered fuel relentlessly across France and Belgium. A motorized army rolled on, while the German war machine wheezed and stalled like a beast drained of blood. Desperation set in, German troops siphoned vehicles, tanks were abandoned intact, aircraft were towed to battlefields like broken birds. Firepower means nothing if it cannot move. And America's greatest weapon was not armor or aircraft. It was mobility. No army moves without fuel, no tank rolls, no aircraft lifts off, no truck resupplies the front. By 1944, Germany was starving for oil. The synthetic fuel plants at Luna, Perlitz, and Blechhammer kept the Wehrmacht alive, until American bombers turned them into flaming craters. Each strike wasn't just an industrial loss, it was a battlefield disaster delayed by days. Luftwaffe pilots were grounded. Panzer divisions sat motionless. Training hours were slashed to mere minutes. Meanwhile, American trucks, the ubiquitous GMC Deuce and a Half, delivered fuel relentlessly across France and Belgium. A motorized army rolled on, while the German war machine wheezed and stalled like a beast drained of blood. Desperation set in, German troops siphoned vehicles, tanks were abandoned intact, aircraft were towed to battlefields like broken birds. Firepower means nothing if it cannot move. And America's greatest weapon was not armor or aircraft. It was mobility. War on the ground is decided by who owns the air above it. By mid-1944, Germany's skies belonged almost entirely to Allied air power. Every tank column, every supply train, every factory became a target exposed beneath watchful eyes. The P-51 Mustang, with its long range and lethal precision, escorted bombers deep into Germany and hunted down the Luftwaffe in its own heartland. German pilots, once feared aces, were overwhelmed by sheer numbers and too little fuel to train replacements. Bombers weren't just weapons. They were erasers, wiping out the Reich's ability to fight tomorrow. Rail yards shattered. Construction halted. Morale collapsed every time the sirens wailed. A German soldier bitterly observed, "The enemy has the air, he has the day, he has the night." Every battle the Americans fought carried the support of steel wings overhead. And every German move came with a risk, instant destruction. The battlefield was no longer two-dimensional. Air supremacy made it total. Where US generals embraced mass production and standardization, Hitler demanded complexity in prestige weapons that could inspire terror and pride. He believed the war could still be won with a single stroke. One tank so powerful it could break the enemy line. One rocket so devastating it could shatter the enemy's will. One jet so fast it could turn back time. He chased the extraordinary and sacrificed the practical. Resources that could have built thousands of guns went into massive tank projects like the Maus, a behemoth too heavy to cross bridges. Manpower vanished into underground factories, crafting rockets that terrorized civilians but changed no battlefront. While the United States simplified, accelerated, and multiplied, Germany complicated, delayed, and shrank. Hitler placed his faith in the spectacular. America placed its faith in production. One leader dreamed. The other delivered. And the gap between fantasy and reality grew too wide to ignore. As the Allies pushed toward the Rhine, the Reich's final hope began to crumble under an avalanche of American firepower, leading to the most decisive confrontations of the war. June 6, 1944, D-Day. The beginning of the end. American soldiers stormed ashore in Normandy alongside their Allied partners, not as a fragile expedition, but as the spearhead of the most heavily supplied invasion in history. Behind them flowed an industrial flood: fuel tankers, ammunition carriers, bulldozers, field hospitals, mobile workshops, everything an army could need to push inland and stay alive. Within days, temporary harbors, mulberries, rose from the sea. In weeks, the beaches transformed into the busiest logistical hubs on Earth. Every sunrise brought more men, more tanks, more artillery. A second US Army Corps landed, then a third. Germany fought fiercely among the hedgerows. Their machine guns tore through advancing troops. Anti-tank guns punctured the sides of Shermans. Panzer counterattacks crashed into American lines. But where the Germans lost a tank, they lost it forever. Where Americans lost a tank, another arrived the next morning. By July, the breakout from Normandy began. Operation Cobra unleashed a barrage so intense that the ground itself seemed to erupt. US artillery, coordinated by radios in every unit, pulverized German positions with precision and volume the defenders could not match. Tiger tanks tried to hold crossroads. Panther formations launched desperate strikes. But American infantry moved with constant armor support, and thunderbolts dived from above, turning German armor columns into burning wreckage. War became momentum. Momentum became collapse. By August, Paris was liberated. German forces retreated toward the Rhine, exhausted, undersupplied, and hunted from the sky. Then the Germans tried to strike back. December 1944, the Ardennes. Hitler's last gamble, the Battle of the Bulge. He gathered what remained of his armored reserves for one final offensive. His goal: split the Allies, seize Antwerp, and force a negotiated peace. At first, surprise favored Germany. Fog grounded Allied aircraft. American troops were pushed back with heavy losses. The winter woods echoed with tank cannon and MG-42 fire. A breakthrough seemed possible. But once the skies cleared, everything changed. Hundreds of Allied fighters and bombers returned with devastating effect. Fuel dumps exploded. Columns stalled for lack of gasoline. German armor, once terrifying, sat helpless under the relentless roar of air power. American reinforcements arrived faster than Germany could respond. Fresh divisions, endless supplies, artillery that never stopped firing. The bulge in the line collapsed under the weight of superior logistics and firepower. After the Ardennes, the Wehrmacht was broken beyond repair. The US Army crossed the Rhine. Bridges were built overnight. Tanks surged deeply into Germany's interior. German cities fell one by one, their factories silent, their troops surrendering in the thousands. The Reich, which once threatened the world, now fought only to delay its inevitable destruction. Hitler had hoped his final weapons would reverse fate. But on the battlefield, firepower, real, countless, unstoppable firepower, decided everything. The Reich's last hope was burning out. And in Berlin, Hitler prepared for his final stand as American and Allied forces closed in from west and south, driving Germany toward its ultimate collapse. By early 1945, Germany's war machine existed mostly on paper. Maps in Berlin still showed armored divisions, but many had only a handful of tanks left. Luftwaffe squadrons still appeared in reports, but most fighters never left the ground. Yet Hitler clung to his last illusions. He believed wonder weapons would save him, weapons like the Me-262 jet, capable of outrunning Allied fighters. It could strike bombers before they released their payloads. It could potentially restore German control of the skies. But there were barely enough jets to form squadrons. Pilots lacked flight hours. Fuel was a luxury they could not spare. Every Me-262 lost was irreplaceable. Every P-51 Mustang lost was replaced by 3 more. Then there were the rockets, the V1 and V2, they hit London and Antwerp with terrifying force. Concrete craters replaced homes. Civilians fled underground. Hitler called them vengeance. He believed they would break Allied morale. But rockets do not take ground. They cannot face a tank. They cannot stop an army rushing toward Berlin. While Hitler chased terror from the sky, America's firepower reshaped the land. Artillery, the true American hammer, shattered German defenses. U.S. gun crews could fire faster, relocate quicker, and coordinate strikes with aircraft in perfect timing. Germany's artillery, outgunned and outsupplied, fell silent more often than it fired. Armor, the relentless American push, overwhelmed the last panzer units. Sherman's advanced in numbers Germany could only dream of. Even when facing superior German guns, they won by endurance. When one fell smoking to the ground, 5 more rolled forward. Air power total dominance was everywhere. Fighter bombers hunted anything that moved. Trains, tanks, convoys, nothing escaped. For German troops, daylight became a threat. In the Ruhr, the heart of German industry, entire armies were encircled and captured, over 300,000 troops, gone in weeks. The factories that once armed Hitler's army now stood empty, silent under Allied guard. There was no turning point left. Only the final collapse. Inside Berlin, shells thundered day and night. The city shook, block by block. Smoke swallowed the skyline. Hitler, in his bunker, stared at maps that no longer reflected reality. There would be no miracle. No secret weapon. No final stand worthy of legend. Because his enemy was not merely soldiers and tanks. His enemy was the industrial power of the United States, a force too vast to defeat, too constant to outlast. On April 30, 1945, Hitler ended his life beneath the ruins of his capital, taking his dreams of superweapons and impossible victories with him. Above the bunker, Soviet troops closed the circle. In the west, American armies halted on the Elbe, their job already complete. The firepower that crossed oceans, conquered continents, and smashed a dictatorship had finished its purpose. The war in Europe was effectively over. By May 1945, the German military existed as little more than scattered units struggling to survive. The vaunted Wehrmacht of 1940–41 had been reduced to skeleton formations, cut off, undersupplied, and exhausted. Entire divisions had been encircled and captured, towns burned, factories destroyed. The numbers tell the story. Over 8 million German soldiers had been mobilized in 1944–45. Roughly 4 million were killed or captured in the final year alone. Entire panzer divisions disappeared, leaving only remnants of tanks and crews. The German army's collapse was systemic. Fuel shortages immobilized vehicles. Artillery could not be replaced. Ammunition ran out at the exact moment soldiers faced assault. Even elite units, the Waffen-SS, succumbed to overwhelming firepower and relentless attrition. Civilian populations faced devastation too. Cities like Dresden, Hamburg, and Berlin were reduced to rubble by sustained bombing campaigns. Bridges, rail lines, and factories lay in ruins, preventing any meaningful counterattack. Hunger, disease, and the chaos of a collapsing state spread across the Reich, breaking morale in both soldiers and civilians. The psychological blow of constant Allied bombardment was staggering. German troops reported. We could see the planes coming, and we knew there was no stopping them. No hiding, no escape, only waiting. Even Hitler's most fanatical officers recognized the futility, yet many fought on out of fear, loyalty, or despair. Meanwhile, American units continued their methodical advance, overwhelming resistance wherever it appeared. The contrast was clear. Where German forces were dwindling, American firepower was inexhaustible. Every American division, every Sherman tank, every artillery battery was part of an endless tide that could not be stemmed. Where Germany hoped for wonder weapons to restore parity, it met only a force that multiplied faster than it could respond. The collapse of the Wehrmacht did not happen in a single dramatic battle. It happened gradually, relentlessly, under the weight of production, logistics, and firepower. By the spring of 1945, Hitler's final hope had been utterly extinguished. The destruction of the Third Reich did more than end a war. It revealed a new truth about modern conflict. Industrial capacity could decide battles long before soldiers set foot on the ground. America's factories, assembly lines, and logistical networks had created a military force that was larger, faster, and more resilient than any opponent could match. The United States had proven that victory was not solely the result of brilliant tactics or heroic bravery, though both were essential, but of the relentless application of production and supply. The numbers remained staggering. Over 300,000 aircraft built, 49,000 Sherman tanks deployed, millions of tons of artillery shells, trucks, and munitions shipped across oceans, troop replacements arriving in waves that never ceased. These figures were not abstract, they translated directly to dominance on the battlefield. German commanders, no matter how ingenious, could never match such output. Every tactical victory they won was fleeting, eroded by the endless replenishment of American firepower. The U.S. Army's logistical sophistication set a new global standard. Supply chains that spanned continents, ports, railways, and highways became weapons themselves. Troops always had fuel, ammunition, and rations. Artillery always had shells. Aircraft always had spare parts. The army could strike anywhere, anytime, with minimal interruption. The consequences were immediate and enduring. Europe's political landscape was reshaped. Germany, once the dominant power, was reduced to occupation zones. Military doctrine around the world shifted to recognize the decisive role of industrial capacity. Even post-war planning during the Cold War reflected the lesson learned in 1944-45. The ability to produce and sustain overwhelming firepower is as decisive as battlefield skill. Perhaps most importantly, the war demonstrated a profound psychological reality. No amount of ingenuity, bravery, or advanced weaponry can prevail against an opponent whose numbers, supply, and endurance are unlimited. Hitler's final hope, rooted in superior machines, terror weapons, and daring gambles, had been dwarfed not by luck, but by the sheer magnitude of American industrial and military power. As the Allies stood among the ruins of Berlin and across Europe, the story was unmistakable. Victory was forged as much in the factories of Detroit, Pittsburgh, and Chicago as it was on the frozen fields of France or the forests of the Ardennes. The US had delivered a force that could not be matched, and the consequences would echo for decades. The final collapse of Germany was not simply the defeat of an army. It was the triumph of firepower, logistics, and production, a lesson the world would never forget. The story of Hitler's final hope is not one of a single battle or a single weapon. It is the story of a world transformed by industry, logistics, and relentless firepower. Hitler imagined miracles, rockets, jet fighters, super tanks could change fate. Yet the United States demonstrated that the true miracle of war was production, sustained and unstoppable. Across oceans, factories became battlegrounds, assembly lines became weapons, every rivet, every shell. Every engine produced added to a force that could not be defeated by cunning, courage, or terror alone. Numbers, when combined with organization and strategy, became absolute. Where Germany fought in scarcity, America fought in abundance. Where Germany gambled on perfection, America relied on consistency. And in the end, consistency won. The human cost was immense. Soldiers endured freezing winters, shattered landscapes, and unyielding combat. Civilians saw cities leveled, families torn apart, and lives consumed by the machinery of war. Yet through these trials, the narrative remained clear. Wars of the modern era are fought not only in the mud on the battlefield or in the air, they are fought in factories, shipyards, and supply depots. Industrial capacity is decisive. Firepower is enduring. History remembers the tactics, the generals, and the moments of heroism. But underlying every victory in Europe was an infrastructure that dwarfed imagination. Hitler's final hope collapsed not from cowardice, betrayal, or a single lost battle. It collapsed under the weight of a nation capable of producing more, faster, and without end. The lesson endures. In total war, innovation alone cannot triumph over abundance. Courage alone cannot prevail against firepower, and even the most desperate gambles are powerless against a force as relentless and precise as a nation fully mobilized. As the echoes of artillery faded and the ruins of Europe lay in silence, one truth remained. The end of Hitler's dream was written not in secret weapons, but in the factories, the ports, and the unyielding assembly lines of the United States. Victory had become inevitable, and the world would never be the same.